Okay, so we're picking up tonight. We're still in We Agnostics, and we're going to be starting on the second. Let's see, we're on the second paragraph, 53. But we talked about. Sadly, I missed talking about the bedevilments last week. Breaks my heart, but I know David and Ashton and company did a great job. I think it's worth probably David going back. Let's just highlight these again real quick. Certainly for anybody who missed, and even if you were here, this is such a critical, fundamental part, of understanding our problem that it's worth a little bit of a revisit, which I'm happy to initiate. So, um, so back one page earlier, guys, 52. And I know David covered this in great detail last week. In the second paragraph, which we call the bedevilments, this is not the only description of what it looks like to have an unmanageable life. This is not the only description of what it looks like to have a spiritual malady or to be spiritually ill. However, comma, it is a pretty good description of what it looks like, right? And so as we read these and as we convert them into questions, and I'm sure again I'm repeating a lot of the content that was covered last week, it's essential that when we're taking somebody through the work, through the steps, that they're able to ask these questions themselves and really personalize it. And of course, I've got to ask myself this every day as well. If I'm finding a lot of 10 step content coming up as I'm going through the day, if I'm finding a little bit of a icky 11 step, a lot of nights, my 11 step in the morning is getting interrupted because my head starts spinning. I'm probably living in these bedevilments. It doesn't matter how long I've been around, how long I've been physically sober or recovered, right? This is such a great checklist to go back to find out how's my life unmanageable today? Where have I taken back the wheel and refused to let God, be the pilot? So they're worth reading again. Let's just go through them again. I want to make sure everybody understands it. So if you're not clear on what any of these things mean, please pop a comment, question related to it in the chat so that we make sure that we give these bedevilments their due. Okay, guys? So, number one, again, we were having trouble with personal relationships. The question is, am I having trouble with personal relationships? This is perhaps the easiest one and maybe the most important because if anyone is at least partially able to be honest with themselves when looking at these bedevilments, they're going to everybody has a resounding yes, right? Our personal relationships are in dire straits when we come in sick, right? Everybody in our life, our spouses, our boyfriends, girlfriends, our parents, our children, our neighbors, our coworkers, our friends, everybody, every relationship is battered and bruised, right? We may have damaged it through acts of commission, actually done damaging things to people in our lives, but we've also probably in some cases damaged these relationships through acts of omission, right? Some of us are more assertive and aggressive and obnoxious in how we act out, right? That was me as an alcoholic back in the day. Some people are very quiet and closed down and passive aggressive, right? So we take from relationships instead of giving to them. It's not all about I said this or I did this or I caused this by action or word. Sometimes it's my absence in a relationship that was really damaging as well. We couldn't control our emotional natures. This one's got to resonate too, right? How much irritability uh, enveloped us. I guess I should speak in the first person singular. I was so irritable and so agitated. Everything set me off. I always had a catastrophic overreaction to any emotion, especially in the area of anger. Right? I went from 0 to 10 in the blink of an eye. I had no lever. You know what I mean? It was always too much. Always defaulted to violence. Always defaulted to anger. I always chose those things. We're a prey to misery and depression. What was my experience, guys? Some of you, I'm sure, will relate. Towards the end, I woke up in the morning, I opened my eyes, and the first thought I had was, not again. Not again, what? Not again, everything. Not again, anything. Like I just didn't want to go through life. Life had no purpose. It had no meaning. I had no joy. Like, what was the point of getting out of bed and going through the motions? Right? Most days I was motivated to just sort of get up and go and make a couple of bucks so I could continue my lifestyle. And what was my lifestyle? The alcoholic lifestyle, right? The alcoholic life, which is the only one I knew. I had to fund that one way or another. Couldn't make a living. I say this all the time when I'm talking about the first step or when David and I go to treatment centers, because whenever we say couldn't make a living, everybody gets offended. Like, I've got a job. Today, at least in the United States, it has never been easier to get a job. Every business owner I know is desperately looking for good people. There are so many jobs out there. This is not about, can I punch in and out of a time clock and pick up a paycheck every Friday? This is about making a living, an honest living. God forbid having a career. That means something I'm interested in, something I'm passionate about. Not everybody is cut out to be a corporate raider. That's not what a career has to be. I know so many people that are in the hospitality industry, they're servers, they love their career. They love helping people and entertaining people, serving people, right? We're not all Fortune 500 CEOs, thank God. A career is something that I show up to every day on time. I don't sneak out early. I don't take smoke breaks when I'm not supposed to. I don't take a longer lunch break than I'm supposed to, right? I don't stay up all night drinking and drugging and then call in using a sick day and then go into the office when I'm really sick because I'm out of sick days, right? It's being a part of society, being a part of business society, being part of a group, part of a business with integrity and honesty, right? That's what making a living means. We had a feeling of uselessness. How did life have any meaning? What was the use? Right? I'm sure David mentioned this last week. A good buddy of ours, Young, who lives over in the UK, he always talks about this when he shares, right? That maybe the real purpose of life is to be useful, right, to other people and certainly to God. This is the second life for us, guys. Old life, old David, so selfish, self-seeking, self-centered. How could I be of use to anybody when all I thought about and focused on and was concerned with was me? It's just not possible, right? A plus B can't equal C in that equation. We're full of fear, not a little scared, not occasionally timid, guys, full of fear. And I know David used examples last week, of getting engaged and being afraid of commitment and being afraid of being alone and, and in a job situation, being afraid of taking the promotion, being afraid of not taking the promotion. Because we are full of fear, because I was full of fear, no matter what life brought to me, I could only come up with fear outcomes. I couldn't come up with joyful growth outcomes. It was only about how I was afraid that I was going to not get something that I wanted or lose something that I had, or maybe miss out on the opportunity, which I guess is not getting something, right? But it's all fear based, right? To my core. We were unhappy. If I've already checked every box in the bedevilments I've listed so far, how am I going to say, oh, but I'm happy at this point, right? What kind of existence is this? Well, listen, of course, is this totally fundamental? Is this totally black and white? Does this mean I didn't have moments of happiness? No, of course I had moments of happiness. I might have consummated a suicide attempt if I had no moments of happiness. I always say I was too much of a coward to kill myself. Thank God, right? So I wouldn't be here today. Sure, I had moments of happiness, but on the whole, was I unhappy or was I happy? On the whole, I was desperately unhappy. I couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Can I be of real help to other people? Do you guys know what it means to be of real help to anyone at any point? It means to give with absolutely no expectation of what I get from it. Right? It's not even a consideration. It's not even well, I'd like to help him, but maybe. No, no, no. It's somebody needs help, and I just say, okay. Right? Again, as a selfish, self-seeking, self-centered, self-absorbed person, this didn't make sense to me. I only thought in terms of providing help as a transaction. Yes, I will do for you today because I will demand compensation later. When I need something, you are going to give it to me because I did you a favor. That is absolutely not being of real help. That is the definition of self-seeking, right? So if I'm what are the 8 of these? 8 for 8 on these bedevilments. I am so terribly, desperately sick. My life is a total mess of unmanageability. My spirit is rotting away. It's cancerous, right? And I know David talked about this, I'm sure, at great length last week. What do all these things have in common? They are all inside me. They start at the inside top of my skull and they go down to just above the soles of my feet. And where do they live the most? In my brain, in my heart, and in my belly, right? Head, heart, and gut, where they are driving me into an early grave and taking down some of the people around me. There is no solution for the bedevilments based on changes in external circumstances. Did anybody ever think, if I just got the right man or woman in my life, right? Anybody think that if I had the right relationship? Some of us thought that. Yeah. Yeah. Did you get that relationship? Yeah. Did it make things any better? No. Did anybody ever think, man, if I could just make another $5,000 a year, just another $10,000 a year, I'm going to get into that next tax bracket, all my problems are going to be solved? Anybody ever get the new job? Yes. Did it make your insides better? No. What happened? It filled my pockets with more money for more drinking and more drug and more flashy shirts to wear to the nightclubs, right? Silliness. This is why we always talk about. We see all these celebrities that we worship, right? They have more money than they know what to do with. They're good looking. They have all this adoration, fame, and all of us love them as fans. And then they overdose or they commit suicide. Why? Because they were desperately, terribly, spiritually ill, just like us. And no amount of fame, money, or attention made them feel better. It did not cure their spiritual malady, right? There's only for spiritually ill people, of which we are, if we come to terms with an agreement with the first step, there's only one solution, a spiritual one. And that's the whole point of 12-step recovery. That's what we're doing here today, right? Yes, alcohol is a problem if I'm an alcoholic. Yes, the various drugs are a problem if I'm an addict. Yes, overeating is a problem. Food's a problem for me if I'm a compulsive overeater. And sex and gambling and fighting and cutting and all these other things that we do ourselves. Those are all problems, serious problems, deadly problems. My ultimate problem, though, right, is my spiritual malady. My drinking, my drug use, that's what qualifies me to be a member of a couple of fellowships like AA and CA. My history, my obsession, my allergy. But what qualifies me for the solution is my spiritual illness.
Yeah, great job. So David and I discussed this before what we wanted to do, and we thought it's so important to go back and review that the spiritual malady here, the unmanageability. And the reason why we did that is because if I don't have a good foundation, if I don't know what the physical dimensions of my life look like, then I'm probably not going to be able to move on. And the reason why I also say that today is because Ashton, who's usually here, she did her first talk on Zoom this afternoon. I got to be a part of it. And she talked about exactly what happened to her. She thought, as well as I did, and maybe you can relate to this, that alcohol and drugs were my problem. And you know what? They were my solution until one day they weren't. But when someone finally broke down at a group and turned this statement into a question, just like David did today, these things resonated with her. She's like, oh my goodness, this is where my life looks like. This is what manageability is. Because the first step in Alcoholics Anonymous says that I'm powerless over alcohol, or in Cocaine Anonymous, I'm powerless over cocaine and all other mind-altering substances. So we're all welcome there. Please come to Cocaine Anonymous. Oh, and by the way, Tony's here today. And Tony, if you ever want to put, and you can do this, please, put in the chat, your meeting for Sunday morning. It's 7 a.m. Central Time here. He's got a great speaker. You guys might know him this week. It's Chris Raymer. He's coming in there. So guys, jump on there. but they always have some good speakers on there. But back to my point. So the physical dimension, I understand what it is. If we go back to page 30 of this book, if you guys mind, hang on to on page 52 here. But we go to page 30 of the book and second full paragraph. And I'm going to read it, but I'm going to point out something that sticks out to me that is connecting some dots between the bedevilments and this. So it says, we learned that we had to fully concede our innermost selves that we were real alcoholics. So that relates to the whole first step. The whole first step, remember in Alcoholics Anonymous, a lot of times we go to meetings, you hear people say, I'm powerless over people, places, and things. Like, that's ridiculous. Nowhere in the book does it say that. I'm not powerless over people, places, and things. I'm powerless over alcohol. I'm powerless over cocaine and all other mind-altering substances. And then it says, this was the first step in recovery. So that is a solid statement that we had to concede our innermost self. And then the next sentence is really important here because it relates to untreated alcoholism. It also relates to other people who do not have a spiritual experience. That is the delusion that we are like other people, or presently may be, has to be smashed. Has to is a must. Has to be smashed, a must. All these things on this page, back to page 52 in the second paragraph, in the second sentence there, it says, the first step is a physical dimension. The second step is, and 2 through 5 are the mental dimensions of the steps. But 6 through 12, and the reason why I say 6 through 12 are the spiritual dimensions of life, and a lot of people you might hear say 10 and 11 are the spiritual dimensions. And I'm not here to debate either one. I'm only going to say because 6 through 12 are, for the simple reason is when we get to page 76, which is going to be quite a while yet, but when we get to page 76, you're going to see a dramatic writing style change, a lot of change in it. We're going to begin talking about powerlessness anymore. We're going to talk about power flowing in. That's why it's so important. If I want these things removed in my life, if I don't want these things to be alive and well in my life, as they'll be being controlled by devils, then I will find out that this works through the practices of the steps, the disciplines of the steps. Yes, I live in 10 and 11 and 12 all day long, but 6 is the beginning of all that power flowing in. So my life is unmanageable today. I'm not, and some of us can see that these things are true when you go to a meeting. Somebody comes in for 10 years, 5 years, 10, whatever amount of years, and they're complaining about their wives. I know a guy who came into me and says, I'm powerless over alcohol. My wife is unmanageable. Like, that's not funny. I mean, we laughed the first time. I thought it was funny, all right? It is funny. But dude, that's untreated alcoholism. Your poor wife, she needs to leave you. I'm telling you right now, run. Whisper in my ear, I'll pick you up and get you out of there. That's not the way we treat. I'm supposed to put my wife's welfare before my own. That's what the steps teach me. When we get to the chapter 2 wives, we'll talk about where these spiritual principles will be practiced. They start on page 111. This is so important to understand and break this big book down in its proper meanings and how we can live this life that God created for us, that were intended for us from day one, but we were blocked off. But if we have friends in this fellowship today, and a lot of them here have been sober for a long time, and we should celebrate what we're our days of sobriety. And I'm segueing this right towards Sam. Today, Sam has 1,000 days of sobriety. 1,000 days of sobriety. Guess what she doesn't live in right now? She doesn't live in the bedevilments. You know why I know that? Because I know her personally. That's why. I know her sponsor. I know that she works these steps. And that she doesn't have to live here anymore. But if I don't live in 10 and 11 and 12, these things are going to crop up. And which one's going to crop up first? The first one. We're having trouble with personal relationships. That one always crops up first. And if you can't get enough of us talking about this, a little commercial here. David, I'm doing a talk tomorrow at the ABC Newcomers Group at 3 o'clock. David and I are doing a talk on steps 8 and 9 on Friday at 1 o'clock on 8 and 9. And then right after that, we switch gears and go back to step 1 at 2 o'clock Central Time. Saturday, we're speaking on step 1, outright mental defects with Terry. So we got a lot of first step talks coming up here in the next couple, 3 days. So I don't know if David wants to put that stuff in the chat or not, but I can't get enough of what the foundation is all about. In the last thing I'll say, which is always the biggest lie in Alcoholics Anonymous when someone says that, the last thing that I'll say is this, that my foundation has to be so darn strong. And when it is, my first step gets stronger each and every step along the way. When I'm working 2, it strengthens my first. When I do 3, it strengthens my first. When I do 4, it strengthens my first, and so on and so forth. And like that clock behind me, that's how the steps are designed. They're like a clock. They're not the steps on the wall. They're circular. They never end.
Okay, let us move on. Now that we did that recap, we are picking up on 53, paragraph 2. Is that right, David?
That is, I hit that last week, but I think we need to start there, don't you? To go forward.
Yeah, based on where we are. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so 53. When we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade, we had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he's nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be?
I have a definition of crisis here, and it is defined as a turning point of a disease when a change takes place, indicating either recovery or death. And I don't think I'll probably put that one in the sentence, but I forget where I even got that definition. It's not from the 1938 dictionary. But let me look it up in that as well. But I've always loved this definition for crisis.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, so these shorter paragraphs are chock full of stuff. They really are. And I think they're purposeful. I think Bill had a reason for doing it. So I'm making sure that I know I'm not alone with this, became alcoholics. So what does that mean? Everything that we studied up to this point, that we know that once we take a drink, we can't manage the amount we drink. And once we stop, we cannot stay stopped. And then what we just read and went over for 20 minutes, the unmanageability of my life. We were crushed by a self-imposed crisis. Self-imposed, not external, not my job, not my wife, not my family, no one else. Self-imposed crisis. Later we find out in the book that our troubles are of our own making. This says we cannot postpone or evade. These are the step 2 instructions. We cannot postpone or evade. We had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or he is nothing. I just got off the phone with one of David's old sponsees. He moved up north, so he got a new sponsor that he can see all the time. Guy went through a bunch of cancer stuff. David knows it a little bit better than I did. Just had surgery. That guy has so much faith. God is everything in his life. And you know what he's doing?
3 cancer surgeries in the last year, and he's in his mid-50s.
He's helping one of my old sponsees who moved away. I asked him to call him because he's got stage 4 cancer. And I mean, of course I was there to love him, but I said, go talk to a guy who's recovered and has got faith in God. And those two got together. And it's like the proposition, Eddie's like, this guy that I'm talking about here who's just had surgery is saying to me today is like, if I go, it's my time. If it's not, I will do the best with what time God gives me here on this earth. And I know how genuine that is because we knew him when he first came in, and he was not a likable guy, just so you know. But those steps change you. It is absolutely impossible. In my experience, I have sponsored lots and lots of people over my time. And I've not liked a lot of my sponsees when I worked with them, and I flat out tell them that. I tell them that flat out they need to get to God through the direct pipe of these steps. And when they do that, they are the most wonderful people. Like David said, brought it up, 2 lives to one, that life I lived before and that life I live now. A personality change sufficient enough to recover from the disease of alcoholism. That's what they experience. That's what they do in their lives. So God is everything. And this is a choice. This is my last choice in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Yes, I got to make a decision in 3, but this is a choice. And it's the biggest choice I'll ever make. The third step is going to be the biggest decision I ever make, because after 3, my life's not going to look the same ever again. If I go ahead and do this work, if I launch into vigorous action, my life will never look the same again if I do that. That's all I got there, David.
Well, that was awesome. So, I'll just add a couple of things because David just rocked that. So when we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade, recapping those bedevilments. Of course, we are going to create this self-imposed crisis. If that's how I'm being driven through life, by my head, my heart, and my gut, how am I going to construct a healthy, sustaining life? It is just not possible, right? self-imposed crisis. I could not postpone or evade, and didn't. I keep falling into the first person plural. I will tell you my experience in the singular. I tried to postpone or evade the inevitable for sure. I'm fond of saying I believed, and I really believed that I could outthink or outmuscle anything that came up in life, but not this, not my self-imposed crisis. I couldn't outthink it. I couldn't outmuscle it. I couldn't postpone it. I couldn't evade it. So what, I had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he's nothing. And this goes back to what I said about using those bedevilments as part of the spot check, right? In our 10th step and considering them at night and in the mornings around step 11, because if I am finding myself starting to rekindle some of those bedevilments, and listen, guys, if my wife's also in recovery a long time, 17 and a half years, right? So we've got God in recovery as the foundation of our marriage. Does that mean we don't get snippy with each other sometimes? Of course we do. We're still a married couple. You know what we don't do? We never go to bed angry. We don't have screaming matches. Nobody ever sleeps on the couch, right? We have a wonderful, healthy, spiritually based marriage. Do we get snippy with each other sometimes? We have 7 dogs here right now. 5 are ours and 2 fosters. One pooped on the floor today, one peed on the floor. It gets tense. Of course, we get a little snippy sometimes. That's not a bedevilment of having troubles in my personal relationships. That's just life. That's just being in a house together, right? That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is I start shaving back, sharpening those tools, and all of a sudden I get into like a blowout argument, theoretically with my wife, but maybe with one of my business partners, right? Then I got to start looking at what are these areas of life where all of a sudden I've decided God isn't everything, because I think, well, God doesn't know how to resolve this conflict I'm having in my business. And then the next thing I'm thinking is God doesn't know how to help me in my marriage. And then God doesn't know, maybe how I should fill out my tax returns because I feel like the tax code is unfair, right? I can start taking back. And then the question is, what's the current state of my unmanageability? What's the current quality or lack of quality in the promises of my life? Have I started sacrificing the promises because I would rather sit back in the bedevilments? I got to give it all to God. I have to believe and have that proven out through faith that God is everything, and therefore he's running the show exclusively. Not for me to run any part of the show. I don't get to be assistant director. I'm only an actor, tree number 3. That's it. Right? I don't even have a speaking role.
If you don't mind, if you would, so this is one of my sponsees, but David tells the story better than I do. So we're talking about, having that disagreement with someone in your home. And we all do, like David said, but we don't have these screaming matches any longer. Why? Did my wife need to change? No, my wife never needed to change. I needed to change. But what does Miner always use as that example, if you don't mind, when they get heated? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's funny because she's actually divorced now. But at the time, Miner and her wife told Becky and I when they're getting into like an argument, they would like stop and look at each other and join hands and pray to God to like basically come into them and to like squash this. And I can tell you, my wife Becky and I have done this a few times. It radically quickly diffuses this, because it's another opportunity to like look at each other and realize like the ridiculousness of what's going on. It right sizes us in a hurry. I know it's very hard to do. It's very hard to do at first, and we haven't had to do it in a while because we just don't really blow up at each other, through a lot of hard work. But we've done it. It's like a nice little miracle technique. Reconnect with God.
That's why it's so important for me to invite God into everything. He's just not there for my alcohol problem, right? And I forget that at times. But the more I practice it, the more I invite him in. And when he comes in, so I don't have these heated arguments with anymore. And I'll give one example of that. And this is not marriage counseling 101, so please do not think you're in the wrong group, because I would not be your guy. And you don't get to ask my wife. She would tell you, oh, I guarantee I have a lot of flaws. But here's the deal. I'm listening to Charlie and Katie Parker, you know, when Charlie was alive, and Charlie talked about this. He says, you know, Katie Parker came home one day. If you guys don't know who they are, listen to their talks. They're brilliant. I love them, man. They taught me so much. David and I both about the book, and they're just funny and they're just enthusiastic, and I just love them. So Charlie's talking about he's the one giving the lead. He says, yep, you know, Katie came home. She's got her hair done. She gets out of the car. She walks into the house. He's sitting in the chair, just relaxing, sitting back. She walks in. He says hi. She says hi. She's like, hey, just got my hair done. Nothing? You got nothing for me at all? I spent all that time in the chair, so I look good for you, and you say nothing. And he's like, whoa. Sorry. May we have a redo? Can we have a redo, please? And so she goes back into the car. She gets out of the car. She comes back in the house. He goes, oh my God, look at your hair. That is beautiful. I'm telling you, my wife heard that one time. My wife is not an alcoholic or drug addict. She heard that talk, and we were laughing about it because it's something that I thought it's funny. Out of the blue, one time my wife got maybe a little snippy for a second. She goes, you know what? I'm sorry. May I have a redo? Wow. Demonstrations. When we get into the nice stuff, we're going to talk about what demonstrations look like a lot more. But I'm just saying, be a demonstration. I get to be a demonstration in other people's lives. I get to have it because I have this, because God is everything. It's not just like he shows up. It's not a parking lot God. It doesn't start to rain, so I slow down in traffic because I'm in a big hurry. It's not that. He's everywhere. And David also uses another example. I think he got it from Mark Houston. It's like when you go to the beach and you want to get a thing of water, you take a thimble. That's what you get, a thimble of water. But if you take a bucket, you take a backhoe bucket, whatever you got to take, and you scoop it up. Like, that's my God. It's got to be bigger than I am. He's got to be everything in my life. And when he does, I have a relationship with God. It's just amazing and outstanding today. I have to work towards that all the time. Why? Because of one simple reason: ego. Ego shows up over and over and over again. And when it does, it has to be smashed and killed and died. Start all over and over again.
And just because it's cute, I'll share one more part of that Charlie and Katie Parker story.
Oh.
Charlie then called a bunch of his sponsees and said, when you see Katie at meetings this week, make a big deal out of her hair. So she was showing at the meetings, and all his sponsors were like, oh my God, Katie, did you do something to your hair? And he just tells it so well. All right, moving on. Paragraph 3 on 53. Arrived at this point, we were squarely confronted with the question of faith. We couldn't duck the issue. Some of us had already walked far over the bridge of reason toward the desired shore of faith. The outlines and the promise of the new land had brought luster to tired eyes and fresh courage to flagging spirits. Friendly hands had stretched out in welcome. We were grateful that reason had brought us so far, but somehow we couldn't quite step ashore. Perhaps we'd been leaning too heavily on reason that last mile, and we did not like to lose our support.
All right, I have a couple definitions here. I have one for faith, which is defined as belief without proof or complete confidence and trust. So in the sentence, arrived at this point, we were squarely confronted with the question of having belief without proof and complete confidence. And then I have another definition here for reason, but it is pretty lengthy, so I'll have you guys hang in there with me.
Okay, take your time.
It is defined as the intellect or its powers collectively. More narrowly, the ability to think, the power to generalize, analyze, and discriminate. And most narrowly, the power of the mind, which enables it to work upon that which is learned by seeing and hearing, etc., and to draw conclusions from this knowledge.
So the ability of the mind to take sort of visual evidence and draw conclusions around it, right? Which is kind of the opposite of faith. This is the point that's being made here. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, there's a lot of capital letters here of the word reason here, right? And Bill was a man of reason too. He believed in logic, and where did that get us? We had to learn that logic and self is not going to solve my problem. But it started out by arriving at this point. So the point that we're arriving at is from the prior sentence that God is either everything or He's nothing, and we were squarely confronted with the question of faith. So faith is in the third step. So as that sentence goes on, we couldn't duck the issue. Some of us had already walked far over the bridge of reason. So the bridge of reason started here in 2. Now I'm going to step over the bridge to the shore of faith. The desired shore of faith was the solid share of faith. Solid faith. That's what that is. And it outlines the promise of the new land, capital letters there, new land, had brought luster to tired eyes and fresh courage to flagging spirits. A lot of $20 words there. Friendly hands had stretched out in welcome. We were grateful that reason had brought us so far. Can't bring us enough. Can't bring us far enough, though. But somehow we couldn't quite step ashore. So perhaps we have been leaning too heavily on reason, which means self, that last mile, and we did not like to lose our support. This is about letting go of all my old ideas again, still, guys. This is still step 2. My prejudices, my preconceived thoughts, my opinions. I got to let go of all those things if I'm going to grow spiritually. Whatever my experiences from the past is a great experience to have had, but I got to have a new experience with these steps as I go forward.
And is everybody catching the sort of metaphor that Bill is trying to use here? And I don't know, maybe maybe in Howard and Kathy's Sunday study, because they have a lot of visuals. I don't know, Kathy, if you guys have a visual is, but what Bill is trying to do here is like illustrate, give us a picture in our mind of what it looks like, right? So like the bridge of reason. So we're trying to get from shore to shore, but we're trying to go across this bridge based on what Sam described. What I can see, what I can feel, what I can touch, and therefore what I can conclude about it. And I remember earlier we talked about in the book pointed out, and it's not a new concept, that visual proof is like the least substantive kind of proof, right? Because it's very easy to fool us in what we see and observe, right? So magicians and illusionists and con people and grifters make livings out of this, right? So the bridge, we're trying to get to the new land, like David pointed out, capitalized. So it's like a higher power. It's a spiritual destination. It's something greater, right? And what is that? It's the desired shore of faith. But we cannot get to faith through reason. That's the point that's being made here, right? Some willingness begets some belief. And then we will get some results, but it's not, the external results are incidental related to our spiritual awakening. The only reason our external circumstances change, and sometimes they don't change, right? Sometimes people, ask David, sometimes people still go to prison, right? You can be sober and pray on your knees. David will tell you all about it. Sometimes people still lose their spouses and their kids. Sometimes people never regain the house, the job, all those things that we thought were the problems, right? But what we get is the healing inside as a result of the work, right? The willingness, the belief, and that leading into faith. So I think Bill's doing a nice job here of trying to paint this like I'm on the bridge and I can see the new land. I can see the shore of faith. And not only that, it's not just me looking, it's not desolate over there because friendly hands stretched out. So it's the people who are already over there. It's like us as sponsors and step guys. We're already on the new land. We're saying, bro, come on, Burke, get over here. Rob, Sam, Carol, come on, come on. It's like in the Matrix, now that I think about it. You guys remember this? He's in the Matrix, and it's sort of based on like belief and faith. He's got to jump from building to building when he's inside the Matrix, right? So we're saying, come on, put aside what you think you know. Leap. The bridge of reason is the construction's over. They're not going to finish the other half of the bridge to the shore of faith. So we must make that leap. And the question is, am I willing to believe enough? Will I make it to shore? If I leap right, as I'm doing the work, taking the steps, I'll make it. I did make it. You guys will. You all did too. And so will the people that we're helping. You're on mute.
The way my wife prefers me. So something that David brought up is so important, like the change that takes place. So, from these prior pages up to this page here, I've had this experience, and maybe you have too. I've worked with other alcoholics. They hate their life, they hate their wife, they hate their job, they hate their finance, they hate everything about them. But in a short period of time, by working these steps, and there is direct result of working these steps, they receive what happens on page 27, David's favorite page. Their ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which once were the guiding force of their lives, were suddenly cast to one aside, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives began to dominate them. When that happens, then what happens? My insides change, and then my outsides start to match them. They start to love their wife. They start to love their job. They start getting their finances, and they start to love their life. All those things are internal. None of those things are external. But the internal affects the external. And that's the direct result of working these steps. So, when Bill's talking about, this is not even a jumping off point yet. It's prior to the jumping off point, which is going to be in 3. But it's like, oh my gosh, it's so vital to be so engaged in this and have an understanding. Is like, God is everything. Like, just that mustard seed of a beginning, and it grows into an immense relationship of power greater than myself.
All right, continuing on. Bottom of 53. That was natural. Okay, well, let's make sure where we were. So in closing out that last paragraph, perhaps we had been leaning too heavily on reason that last mile, and we did not like to lose our support. That was natural. But let us think a little more closely. Without knowing it, had we not been brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith? Or did we not believe in our own reasoning? Did we not have confidence in our own ability to think? What was that but a sort of faith? Yes, we had been faithful, abjectly faithful to the God of reason. So in one way or another, we discovered that faith had been involved all the time. Sam, nothing? Okay.
Objectively?
Objectively. Look up
Please?
objectively, please.
Come on. I need that one even. I can't remember I think, what is it, David? You probably already know.
I think, go ahead, and then I'll tell you what I think.
Okay. All right. So, this is on to page 54 on the top of the page. I'm going to answer these questions. So it starts in the bottom of page 53, 4th paragraph. Without knowing it, had we not been brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith? Yeah, I mean, a certain kind of faith in some things. We're going to find out what that really was about. For did we not believe in our own reasoning? The answer is yes. I put a yes there. Did we not have confidence in our own ability to think? Answer that with another yes. What was that but a sort of faith? Yeah, it is a sort of a faith. Yes, we've been faithful, objectively, faithful to the God of self. So in one way or another, we discovered that faith had been involved all the time. Remember again, Bill's capitalizing the word reason in relationship to divine. So do we have that definition yet, Sam, or is it a little early? Oh, no. You don't have it? Okay. All right. That's okay. Go ahead, David.
Well, I was just going to say, I bet abjectly.
I have it. It's just.
Oh, you have it.
Go ahead. I'm still writing it down. Give me a second.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, so I won't even bother then. We'll have Sam have the floor. Okay, so here's what's going on here with the Bill's talking about, right? And just sort of underscoring what David's saying is this is about. We've said this before. What is this chapter really about? It is introducing the ideas of belief, and then later in the chapter here, it's getting into faith. Most of what Bill is doing here is he's coming into this chapter saying, based on his experience and the other people that got sober with him to help write the book, they had all of this prejudice, all this closed-mindedness, all this unwillingness. So mostly this chapter is a sales job on why we should let that stuff go. So his point here around faith is I ought not, put up the stop sign and say, whoa, I'm not willing to buy into faith, because he's saying, haven't I always been living on faith anyway? And he's saying, look at the simple ways in which I went through my life based on faith, right? So here's how I went through life. If I believed in my own reasoning and the reasoning produced results, don't I have faith in myself in the way that I think? Right? Because I believe in myself and how I can, construct and deconstruct a situation. My brain works for me. So I believe the next time I have an obstacle, a challenge, an opportunity, I have faith that I will be able to sort that out between my ears. Right? So it says, yes, we've been faithful, plenty faithful, based on logic and reason. So what this point is it doesn't matter how I was applying the faith. I need to realize I've been operating with it. Sam, abjectly.
So the definition of abject is to throw away, very low in spirit or hope. And I like that last part. So I don't know how to necessarily put it in the sentence, but it was just we were very low in spirit in our faith that we had of reason. In recovery, we are very high in spirit of like our faith in our higher power, So I think I think that was a good polarity right there.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this too is what David brought up about 15 minutes ago about, if I just had that right relationship, if I just had enough money, I just got enough promotion, that better house and that stuff like that, then my life would be better based on self, if I thought that was true. The problem with that is, and Bill references this word a number of times in the big book, that's futility. I don't, on my power, yeah, I may get those things, but it's not going to change the internal condition that I suffer from, which is alcoholism. So on page, in the big book, you don't have to go to it, but on page 9, it says, his coming was an oasis in the dreary desert of futility. Futility is like pointless or useless. It's useless for me to continue on this same path. I'm going to continue to either get the same results or a worsened set of results. That is my experience. I think that's the experience of the first 100 too. So that's all I got on that.
Sam, anything else? No? Okay. Let's continue. Top of 54. We found too that we had been worshipers. What a state of mental goose flesh that used to bring on. Had we not variously worshiped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves? And then with a better motive, had we not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, or a flower? Who of us had not loved something or somebody? How much did these feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with pure reason? Little or nothing, we saw at last. Were not these things the tissue out of which our lives were constructed? Did not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence? Wow. Did not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence? It was impossible to say we had no capacity for faith or love or worship. In one form or another, we had been living by faith and little else.
I have goose flesh, which I didn't know was actually a term back then for goosebumps. So that's all.
Yeah. And there's also a medical definition for goose flesh, but I'm not the medical person, so I'm not giving it to you guys. So I don't remember what it is, but I know that there is one. It's called something else. But anyways, so we found that we have been worshipers. I've been worshipers of plenty of things in my life. Oh my God. And at the time they were not so much incorrectly, right? I went to worship as a child with my family, forced to do. So then I had this prejudice, this emotion inside of me that I don't want to do this because it wasn't fun to be there anymore. So I didn't enjoy the worship that I was going to. But then I would worship relationships. Oh my God, I'd obsess over relationships. I would worship money, more hours. I got to be really, really careful here. And here's my example of that. I find a lot of people that I work with, they get really motivated because of the pain that they're in. They're experiencing step 0, like you would not believe. They're in so much pain, and they want to do this work, and they're committed to doing this work. And I tell them I'll match their willingness, and we start doing this work. We go through step 1, take them through step 2, and we agnostics. Go to step 3, talk about making that decision and get on our knees and sit there and make that decision of the selfless prayer in step 3. Then all of a sudden, they start worshiping other things. I got to work overtime. I got to make more money. I can't make that meeting that I was supposed to meet you with, so we can start this 4th step, right? Oh, you know what? Tonight my kids are sick. I can't make it tonight. And they start worshiping, spending time with mama. Maybe, and Howard uses this example a lot of times, maybe there's something great on Netflix that I got to get caught up on. Worship those things. If I worship all those wrong things, if I don't put my sobriety in front of everything else, I promise you one thing. This is my experience, because I came into Alcoholics Anonymous and Cocaine Anonymous in 1992, and I got sober in 1999. And there was 7 years of a huge void in my life that was affecting a lot of people in a negative sense, that my life was never changing for the better, and neither was anyone else's here today. I stopped worshiping those other things because I stopped putting anything in front of my, only thing that comes in front of my sobriety is God. And one of our good buddies, David, and I, he uses this example. It's not in the book, but I love the example. God first, sobriety second, and all relationships after that third. Man, if I keep it in a nice, tidy order, life is really good. I don't have to worry about worshiping sunsets and seas and flowers and all these other things. Those are wonderful things that were created by my power, my God anyways, but they're not. I'm supposed to be worshiping the proper thing today. If we would not have enough time, Zoom would run out of minutes. If I told you about all the miracles, and then I would still miss 90% of them that have happened in my life. I had one happen to me yesterday. It was absolutely amazing. It didn't come of me, but it came through me. Man, you don't want to miss that. That is why it's so important to be connected to this power. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I'll just add that, to what I mentioned in the last couple of paragraphs, is that Bill is just really beating us about the heads here to make sure we understand. This is not a new concept. It's a new way of looking at faith, of love, of worship. But we were doing all these things, guys, right? We were already operating this place. We're just sort of changing the channel a little bit. And I think David brought up a really good example of how quickly we see this in recovery. This is what takes people down, right? We talk about, makes me think of like Jim, the car salesman, right? Like he stops drinking, gets a little help from presumably Bill and Bob. So understands 1, gets a little belief, made a beginning, which is step 3. But then what happened? Failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life, right? So what happens to Jim? He thinks, well, I better get back and work at that car dealership that I used to own. I need more money, right? Family got reassembled, so I got that benefit, right? So now I'm spending time with the family. Now I'm back in the job. And then we know what happened to Jim, right? From earlier in the chapter. Went out drinking, right? Earlier in the book, rather. So easy for us to fall into misdirection. And ultimately the question is, and this, nobody, including myself oftentimes, wants to ask myself this question. Well, does God want me to answer the phone when I see a sponsee calling, or does God think it's okay that I click to send a voicemail? I already know the answer to that question, right? But sometimes I don't want to put it out to God, right? Because whatever I'm doing, right? Work, Netflix, have some with my dogs, right? Those are the things that David wants. To worship and love.
2 real quick things. I did very quick too. So I've always had some faith. The problem with that faith, it's been misdirected. And today I have a power, a God in my life that directs my faith today. And I forgot the other thing, so we'll just call it a night. So
perfect place to stop on that note. All right, 1 second.